There we go.
I always wanted to do that.
All right, everybody, welcome. Is this working? Is my mic working? All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Kelsey Doom. I'm the president and CEO at the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce and staff liaison for the Public Affairs Committee, who is responsible for putting these forums on. So we have a few committee members in the room here. Leanne Pierce, we've got Dan McCulley, Spence Hawley, and I don't know if anybody else hopped in here that I didn't see. I don't believe so. So thank you all for being here. We want to thank a couple sponsors. We have the Brookings Economic Development Corporation, and their board of directors contributes financially to the Public Affairs Committee every year, so we really want to thank them. As well as Cool Beans, who provides the coffee at our forums. We really appreciate the coffee. Couldn't be here without them. And just a couple housekeeping items. If you have questions to pose to the candidates, Spence and Dan back there have slips of paper with some pens. Be sure to write those down. We're really proud to host very fair forums. We don't ask questions posed at any one candidate. Both candidates will answer all questions. We are increasing the time limit for each question to 90 seconds instead of 1 minute, just because we only have 2 candidates. So we're going to go through those questions rather quickly. So if you have questions, be sure to get them in. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ms. Angela Boersma. She's going to be our moderator for the forum. So Angie, take it away.
Thanks, Kelsey. First of all, I think Kelsey covered the thanks to the audience for being in attendance. Thank you so much to the candidates for being present today, and to Commissioner Pierce for assisting with wrangling all of your questions. Bring as many as you want. So our process today is going to be that each candidate gets 2 minutes for opening remarks, and then a handful of questions have been provided by the committee. If there are additional questions, like Kelsey said, those will be available. Each candidate has 90 seconds to answer the questions. When there's 10 seconds left, you'll see Kelsey with a little 10-second reminder. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for final remarks at the end, and we'll kind of take turns going back and forth. Clearly, there's a lot of public interest, and so we're excited to have folks here today. Just a reminder that the forum is being broadcast on Mediacom Channel 9, Swiftel Communications, and ITC channels, and will be replayed again tonight, Saturday at 9 p.m., Sunday at 2 p.m., Monday at 6 p.m., and the forums will also be out on the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce's YouTube channel next week. So with that, we'll start with opening remarks, and we'll start with Marty Stanwyck.
Good morning. I'd just like to thank the Chamber for the opportunity to come today and put this all together, and Cool Beans, because I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee, and it was good. So anyway, I got to do a disclaimer right away, is that I didn't pick today, and it's a Jacks game, and I'm sorry for that. So that's a disclaimer. So if you have to get up and go to the Jacks game, that's fine. Again, I'm Marty Stanwyck. I'm the Brookings County Sheriff, and I've been sheriff for 23 years. And I'm a hometown boy. When I graduated from high school, I couldn't wait to get out of town. And then after I left, I couldn't wait to come back to town. And I've spent my whole career here in Brookings. And I'm not a Republican sheriff, and I'm not a Democratic sheriff. I'm an independent sheriff. I just want to be the sheriff and do the best job I can. Also, I have a great wife that I met as a policeman carting at the local bar. And she was at age, so everything was fine there anyway. We live 5 miles north of town. I have 2 daughters. They're grown, and they're SDSU graduates. And I'd like to thank the supporters that I've had and the encouragement I had to run for sheriff. And I plan to continue that, and hopefully your support for the next 4 years. So thank you.
With that, Jeff Collars.
All right. Yes, my name is Jeff Collars. I'd also like to thank the Chamber and the committee and all of you for coming. It's great to see the showing and the interest. A little bit about myself. I've been in Brookings since about 2004. I grew up in Sioux Falls. My lovely wife Amber is in the back for support and encouragement. We live on the south side of the county, down by Lake Campbell. We have 2 children, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, who are very active. Thinking about this, law enforcement never was something that I wanted to get into as a child or as a young adult. Law enforcement chose me. My wife and I met when we were corrections officers at the Brookings County Jail when we were going to college. and it kind of was a slippery slope after that. I worked for the State Highway Patrol as an agent or a trooper for about 9 years. I was an assistant squad leader with them, a crash reconstructionist. Did a lot of instructing and basically all out of the Brookings area. Since 2013, I joined DCI. So I'm a special agent with DCI right now, working major crimes on the east side of the state. I've become highly specialized in that area. I have trainings, over 3,000 hours of specialized training, including leadership. I'm a licensed polygraph examiner, crime scene investigation. I'm a graduate of the National Forensic Academy in Tennessee from 2015. Thinking about why I ran was, a couple factors. I believe that offices should be challenged, and that's something that we haven't seen in Brookings for a while. So I thought back about myself and what I have to offer. I felt obligated. I've been successful in my career, and my thought now is to make sure that other people succeed and the community succeeds. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll jump right into questions. And just a reminder, 90 seconds, but you don't have to use the entire 90 seconds. You're just welcome to. And I will cut you off if you get long-winded. So we'll start with, what do you believe are some of the most important qualities for a sheriff to have? And we'll start with Jeff.
The biggest challenge that we face in law enforcement is integrity. Also, that relationship with the public. I have worked in law enforcement for 17 years, and the entire time keeping in mind that how I interact with people and what I do in a day-to-day basis, I need to be proud of how I acted if it was in front of the public on Kello or wherever. So I think integrity is probably the most important aspect, and dedication and commitment.
Thank you. Marty.
Thank you. I've spent my whole career in public service. Started at the University Police in 1977 and moved on to the Brookings Police Department. While I was at the police department, I was a school liaison officer, one of the first school liaison officers. Taught the DARE program. I'm a proactive sheriff. I believe in prevention, and that's why a lot of the times that when I first took over as sheriff, we didn't even have 24-hour service as sheriff, and now we do have that 24-hour service. So I think that one of my best is having an open door policy, and I give everybody my cell phone number, and everybody will call me first a lot of times. Not everybody, but a few will call me, and I says, you got to call dispatch for this accident. You can't call me at home. Anyway, and so that's what open door policy, and of course I try to stress to my deputies also, when someone comes in, and maybe we can't help them as a law enforcement officer, but we can guide them where they can go. If it's another agency or another service, I don't want anybody to go out the door and go, I didn't get any help here. I want to make sure that we get everybody some help. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll jump right into the next one, and that's a lot of collaboration occurs with other local law enforcement agencies. And the new City of Brookings Police Chief regularly highlights the importance of community policing. What would be your position on community policing, and if you agree about its implementation? I'll start with Marty.
Good question. We've gotten away from community policing, and in the 90s, that was a big topic, was community policing. And then after the George Floyd incident, community policing has come back. Now, recently, we just wrote a grant for community-oriented policing, in which I was able to hire an extra deputy, and so that way I can put someone in to try to promote community policing. And it's actually my school resource officer during the summer. He's not in the school system, so he went around to most of the businesses in the county, to every town, asking them if they had any concerns, and that was part of his job. Actually, all my deputies are community service oriented. In other words, public relations is a big thing. I want them to get out of their cars, go into a convenience store, talk to them, ask them what's going on, those types of things. But community policing is a thing that we need to start back with, being in the community, engaging with the citizens. I used to do surveys. I need to do a survey again of the communities and the towns and ask if they feel they have adequate law enforcement and that. And I pride on being open-minded. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
I think Marty's right on a lot of that. Community policing is extremely important. We see, or I've seen in the areas around the nation, that trust degrades between the public and law enforcement. That's another reason why I stepped up to this, is because I don't ever want to see that come here. Law enforcement in Brookings has been, it's extremely important to me. Community policing is a huge part of that, and I think it starts from the top. So I look at what I've done for a campaign. I think we need to step up into our communication with the public. I've gone from a relatively unknown person in the community, just doing my business and kind of being the glue to make things happen, to now being up in front and center in front of you all. I think that's what you'll see with me leading the office, would be increased communication between the public and the office. That is going to help in a couple different areas, including integrity, transparency, and initiating that community policing aspect. I agree, we need to make sure that we're outside of our cars and that we're interacting with people and we're interacting with other professionals. So that's very much our role, and we need to do that. The post-George Floyd world has changed everything for us. And expectations of law enforcement have changed in the last 5 and 10 years. So I think we need to make sure that we're aware of that as leaders and step up to that expectation of the public.
Thank you. We'll continue on with this kind of collaborative notion between other agencies. And so for each of you, what would you or have you done to foster healthy collaborative relationships between other local law enforcement agencies and the state's attorney's office? That might include the PD, the sheriff's office, the UPD, highway patrol, etc. And so we'll start with Jeff.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So where I'm going to stand out in this regard is my current position. As a special agent with the State Division of Criminal Investigation, we're an assist agency. Our relationships are what help us to get into that point where we are working with other offices. Right now, what I'm expected to do, and I do, is I collaborate with all of the counties on the east side of the state for the most part. There's very few departments or offices in the state that I don't have a contact or know somebody in, and that goes throughout actually the nation too. It's important for us to make sure that we team up to tackle some of these challenges and expectations that the public has. And being in South Dakota, to get some of these big problems taken care of, it doesn't depend on one agency. It's all of us working together.
Thanks. Marty.
Thank you for the question. And I think it is important to get along with other law enforcement. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that I haven't had my issues with other agencies, because I have. And one of the things is that I try to be transparent. And if I receive complaints in my office, I'm going to look into those complaints. And sometimes I rub other agencies the wrong way. But at the end, I think we're all at the same goal. And one of the things was with mental illness. And just for example, how I think, with the new police chief that's coming, I think relationships will improve amongst the agencies and so forth. And for an example is last night, I got a call from a person that recognized that on Facebook that someone was thinking about self-harm. And this just happened last night. And I called the Brookings Police Department to do a welfare check on the person, and they went and found him and got him help and so forth. So my pride will be, or my goal will be, to increase relationships with other agencies. But again, as the chief law enforcement officer, and I know that if Dan Nelson's here, we'll argue about who's actually the chief law enforcement officer, but I think that if someone comes to my office and complains about another agency, I need to look into that. So a lot of my criticism that goes with other law enforcement agencies is because someone came with a complaint to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder to stay nice and close to your microphone so that it picks up for those who are listening at home. Thanks. We'll continue on. The Sheriff's Office is responsible for contracted law enforcement services in many of our outlying small communities like Volga, Aurora, Elkton, etc. If you're noticing the need for more patrol issues in those areas, but those communities aren't authorizing additional contract hours, how would you advocate for more patrol and additional staff resources to cover those areas of the county? We'll start with Marty.
Thank you. Well, that's a good question, and I appreciate that question, is because that we have, I have 4 contract towns. In other words, I'm their police chief for 4 contract towns. I try to attend the council meetings, but I don't. It's hard to do that because they're all on Monday nights, so I have to kind of pick and choose where I go. You know, the last census showed that the city of Volga now contracts for 60 hours a week. So in other words, I got to provide 60 hours of patrol service for the city of Volga. The last census shows that there are a population of 2,000 now. Is it time to upgrade that? They may need, actually, they pay for a deputy and a half, actually. And, you know, I work with the city council. I probably work with the city of Volga more than the other cities, just for the fact is Volga has a city manager. So if there's an issue in Volga, he's quick to call me and stuff. And probably the biggest issue is traffic in Volga. Small communities, their traffic flow has changed, and so probably the biggest thing is traffic. The other towns, the city of Elkton is 18 hours, and the city of Aurora is 10 hours, and the city of White is 10 hours. And it seems like I struggle every time there's new council people because they either want more law enforcement or they want less law enforcement. I'm either in their town at the right time or I'm in their town at the wrong time. What I am proud of is that Central Dispatch. Oh,
Sorry,
I gotta
Marty.
stop. That's an issue at the council.
I was going to say, we're going to ask you to watch Kelsey really closely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Moving on, Jeff.
I'll probably have that same problem at some point. I'm a negotiator, so every once in a while I just start talking and I don't actually answer the questions that are there. So that's a great question, and contract law is continually an issue that you have to keep an eye on. The way that I would deal with that is continued communication with the municipalities. I also think it's important that we do some surveys. That's been a long time since that's been addressed in the county, just on the expectations of what the public has. Traffic studies are always good, but through a combination of those and then working with the county commission to address those inefficiencies in manpower would be how I would address it.
Thank you. We'll move on to another hot topic, and that's workforce. Recruitment is increasingly challenging in the world of law enforcement. Please talk about what strategies you would use to recruit, as well as how you'd intentionally work to diversify your staff team. We'll start with Jeff.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's something that all public and private businesses are dealing with. What I bring to the table is a new style of leadership, a lead from the front type of leadership, and I think the deputies and people there will see that difference when they see me working beside them in a much more active role. And eventually what I want to do is I want to push that open door policy to create an environment where I can ensure their success in a healthy, well-rounded environment, and I think eventually that starts to attract people. So we all get into law enforcement for reasons other than pay. We don't get into it to make a ton of money. We get into it to make a difference, and we get into it to be able to help our communities. I want to push that and make it a destination for law enforcement. It's a great community already, but we can continue to work on that. As far as recruitment and retention, I think it's also important to abide by best practices as far as hiring new people coming on and reducing liability and reducing issues by implementing psychological exams for new deputies coming in. And also, I'm a polygraph examiner, so I have to say that I believe in the quality difference that comes from pre-employment polygraph exams. That'd be something that would be different, and I would change to bring to Brookings County.
Thank you. Marty.
Thank you. I think this is a hot topic for all law enforcement administrators all over the country. Probably is recruitment, retaining, and that. It's not like the days of me where that I want to continue in this field. Is that they don't want to stay in one place. I never have a problem getting applications. My problem is getting good applications, and a lot of them have previous law enforcement experience, but there's some reason why they left their department. So it's tough to do background checks and find good applicants. But I've been lucky, is that I feel I have a good deputy base right now, And we do psychological tests, and we do testing. And the only thing I don't do is polygraph, because I'm not 100% on polygraph, and we'll probably argue about that, because you can get two different polygraph operators, and you can come up with two different ends at the end. But I think we do a good job of looking into things. Now with the state of South Dakota, you also can call law enforcement training to see if there was any complaints, use of force complaints or those types of things. You'd be surprised how many officers have had use of force complaints, and they are registered with the law enforcement training. So that's another tool that we can use to make sure that we get the best qualified law enforcement officers.
Thank you. The next question is in regards to the newly expanded county jail. So how do you feel about the current jail and staff, and what changes would you imagine implementing upon election if elected? So we'll start with Marty.
Can you do the first part again?
Yep. How do you feel about the current county jail and its staff, and what changes, if any, would you imagine implementing after the election and upon taking office?
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, the county commission has been good to me. We have additional correctional officers. We have 15 full-time correctional officers, and we have 14 part-time correctional officers. I try to maintain a minimum staffing of 5, and at times we supplement that with part-time help. We have different areas in the detention center now. It's a 24/7 area. In other words, we have a program that 115 people come into the detention center, and they're either on scram bracelets or they're on 24/7 PBTs and so forth. One of the things that I'm looking to do is that we're seeing in some of our inmates staying longer. And they don't. Every inmate that comes to the county jail doesn't go to the prison. They spend their time, and then they go back out in the community. So we're going to start doing some programming for inmates that when they get out back into the public that they can apply for a job. We're going to do some resume training, things interview techniques and those types of things, so that they can get back in the community and be an asset to the community and make a living and so forth. So I'm proud of what we've done in the jail. I try to get all my staff with mental health training, and when I get back in, we're just gonna continue on and do the best we can.
Thank you. Jeff.
Angie, can you repeat the question so
Yep.
I make sure I answer it?
So how do we feel about the current county jail and its staff, and what changes, if any, would you imagine implementing after the election and upon taking office?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question. So I started my career as a corrections officer, never intending to get into law enforcement. It was a little scary for me initially coming into that, to be honest with you, because I came as a college kid with no experience in law enforcement. What I would like to do is create some standardized training, basic training, bringing people in as corrections staff, and then helping them progress in their career. So a couple areas that we can help is implementing a mentorship type program with corrections officers. So when they come in, they have contact with an assigned veteran correction officer. This is done similar to what's done in law enforcement with field training. But I would like to bring that in. So building off of that, I think we help out those corrections officers with interaction with people or some training on how to deal with people with mental health issues and addictions. That's a scary thing for those young people coming into that or young professionals starting as corrections officers. And they often don't know how to interact or how to interject and try to change that cycle that we see going on in our corrections facilities. I'd like to bring that to the table.
Thank you. The next question continues on the jail expansion. And so with the new detention center expansion, will Brookings County be accepting inmates from other counties and other areas of the country now? As best you can. We'll start with Jeff.
So right now, I think they do bring some in, and I think that's right. What I would do would be continue on that regional type jail approach where you open it up to surrounding counties and communities that are looking for places to house their people. That's a great opportunity for us in Brookings to run that similar to a business, where you start reducing that tax cost that comes to us as taxpayers. But that's the approach that I would have and continue.
Thank you. Marty.
Thank you for the question. We built the jail for our needs, for Brookings County needs. That's the most important, that we built it for our needs. My daily average is 37 inmates right now. Right now I have a contract with Moody County and Lake County. Moody County gives me about 7 inmates. Lake County at one point didn't have any female correctional officers. He's struggling to get female correctional officers, so I was taking female correctional officers from them. I believe that I can probably rent out 20 beds and be safe. And we're dealing with the U.S. Marshals Service right now for federal inmates. The Department of Corrections is trying to get some beds from us also, and the female from the female prison. So there's lots of needs out there. The city of, or I should say, Cottington County has tried to get a new jail facility, and they've been voted down twice. Lake County tried to get a new jail facility. They were voted down, and actually a private citizen donated them 7 acres of land for the new jail, and they still got voted down. So I feel pretty lucky that the citizens of Brookings said it was okay that we do that jail expansion. And again, the jail was built for Brookings County to make sure that we provide adequate space for Brookings County, because it's a responsibility of the county to provide jail service for all their law enforcement within that county. So in other words, the highway patrol that makes an arrest in the county of Brookings, I take their inmates. The city police,
Sorry, Marty.
they also, I take their inmates.
Moving on. I need to be more forceful in this, as it turns out.
Can you throw something at me?
All right. So we're going to move on a little bit. So right now, it seems like DUIs are at an all-time high in Brookings County. So what are your thoughts on combating that? And in tandem with that, what are your thoughts on using the county's alcohol diversion program? We're going to start with Marty.
Thank you. You know, I have a different opinion on the DUIs. Is there more DUIs out there? Is law enforcement looking for them more than they used to? You know, so you kind of look at it that way too. And I know that we've came a long ways with designated drivers and those types of things, and try to combat the DUI driver. But I also think that law enforcement is also looking for them and detecting them and doing a better job of getting them off the streets and so forth. Diversion programs are good, but I think sometimes diversion programs might lead to the fact that we're slapping their hands. You know, with diversion program, especially with underage drinking, I think that there is some merit with someone that's underage to get a diversion program, to go diversion when they make a mistake. Some of the mistakes they make is they're a designated driver. They go downtown, they pick up their 6 friends, but they let them come in the car with alcohol. They get stopped, and even though the driver hasn't drank anything, he still can be arrested, or she can be arrested for possession. I think a diversion program, if the law enforcement did happen to arrest her for that, is that the diversion program is good for something like that. But also, I talk to a lot of young people that figure they got one break, that they can get caught for drinking, and they can go to diversion. So I think there's merit to diversion, but sometimes I think we put too much emphasis on diversion.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my history, I was a trooper for 9 years, so traffic enforcement, traffic safety is near and dear to my heart. I have unfortunately seen too many people lose their lives on the roads. DUIs are the major factor for that. I think we always need to have our eye on that. I agree with Marty on many aspects. Education and prevention are huge. Making sure that we advise the community of what's going on is probably the first aspect that we need to make sure we keep an eye on. Enforcement, law enforcement has challenges with the increases in drugged and or drunk and drugged DUI scenarios. and we're getting better about that apprehension. So you do see the numbers go up that way, but we do need to continue our efforts. How I would address it is continued participation in efforts like saturation patrols with other agencies and checkpoints and continued patrol efforts.
Thank you. In addition to regular patrol efforts, the needs and requirements of the job of deputies and other law enforcement agencies continues to grow to include recognition of behaviors that might indicate a mental health crisis, autism spectrum disorder, or closely associated cognitive disabilities. What would either of you do, or what are you currently doing or would propose doing to provide tools for law enforcement officers to recognize those types of conditions on a call? We'll start with Jeff.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. So what would you do either currently or would propose doing to provide tools for law enforcement personnel to recognize behaviors that might indicate a mental health crisis?
So the simple answer to that is continued training. Standards are always, or new studies are always being produced, and law enforcement needs to stay on top of that. So increased training would help to alleviate some of those issues.
Marty, we'll move on to you.
Okay, that's a good question. That's probably one of the ones that I try to get the most training for. I require that all my staff has at least the 8-hour mental health training. But I also want all my staff to have the CIT training, which is a 40-hour course. Traditionally, when law enforcement, when I first got into law enforcement, we probably didn't recognize mental health issues in a crisis and that. And we need to, as law enforcement officers, when we go to a situation and we think someone's disorderly, in the past we put handcuffs on them, drag them to jail, or whatever the case may be. But what we need to do now is to recognize that the person might be having a mental health episode and then give them the proper after that. In other words, not take them to jail, but maybe we need to have them evaluated or whatever, depending on what the person says. Sometimes you have no choice but to put hands on somebody, but the biggest thing is to recognize that we have a mental health problem and not that he's trying to break the law. With the CIT training, it's a 40-hour course, and actually they bring actors in, and they act like they got bipolar, or they got depression or whatever. Then the officer interacts with them. A lot of it has to do with, also they have M3 players or whatever. They put them on their heads, and it's like they're having voices in their head, and then how the officer will react to that. That'll stop.
Way to go. Thanks, Marty. Based on some of the things that came up in that question, the next one we'll discuss is, what is your position on training officers regarding the use of force in arrests? We'll start with Marty.
Well, everything changed after George Floyd. We had to write new policies, nationwide policies, basically. Also, the biggest thing, the use of force, was chokeholds. And I have to admit, when I became a policeman, probably the chokehold was probably the basic way to get someone under control, was a chokehold. Now we've eliminated in my policy, and most policies on chokeholds, is that it's a last resort. If you need to do a chokehold to save your life or someone else's life, then you put that person in a chokehold. Also, one of the things that came out is duty to intervene. In other words, with the George Floyd incident, there should have been an officer to intervene. And so now we got policies that if you see a fellow officer, and that's tough, to interject with a fellow officer that you're doing this wrong. But now we need to do that. So they go, and if an officer's doing something with the use of force that they shouldn't, it's a duty to intervene. And so we had to create policies for that, duty to intervene. And again, we've had to step up with our internal affairs type situations so that we do everything right. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, same question to you.
Good question. So the ways that I would address that, I think we need to continue to build on our communication with the public that we serve, like I talked about before. That's going to be something that starts day one. As far as what you do at the very front end of having a law enforcement officer. Again, I'm going to say that we have to make sure that we're screening those people properly when they come into the job, and that we need to make sure that we're doing a full background psychological examination and a polygraph, which is best practice for hiring people and decreasing that risk of having improper use of force issues. On top of that, training, and I agree with Marty on the duty to intervene policies are a great change, and so it's a combination of steps that you would have to decrease that, but it's definitely in the public's eye. And I think most of 99.9% of the times that we're interacting with the public, the officers do what's right. But we can help that perception by increasing our transparency to the public and that communication.
That leads really well into the next question, and that is, what are you doing and or would you do to prevent and address potential officer misconduct issues, whether in policing or ethics or other areas of potential concern, and how have you prepared for leading in that situation? We'll start with Jeff.
So that is a good question, and basically my response is very similar. I think we need to increase our communication with the public. Look at what I've done in my campaign. I went from being relatively unknown to being up front and center and communicating daily. I think we need to step up and do that. As far as the other aspects, it's hiring the right people, training the right people, and continuing with ethics training and leadership training, and making sure that they ensure or they recognize that it's that relationship between the public and law enforcement that helps us succeed. We have to make sure that we double down on that trust.
Great, thank you. Marty?
Angie, could you repeat the question again?
Yep. Let me go back
Sorry.
to where it
My
was.
time don't start yet, right?
You're good. So don't worry, Marty. We gotcha. So what are you doing and or would you do to prevent and address potential officer misconduct issues, whether in policing or ethics or other areas of potential concern? And how have you prepared to lead in that situation?
It's a good question. Recently, I just had to fire a deputy for use of force. And he knew the policies. He broke policies. What's important about administrators is to make sure that you have the proper training and that they go through policy. When I look for officer misconduct, it's because they probably violated my policy. And this indication he did violate policy, and I had to let him go. And so this is something that's important to me, and I'm going to make sure that my officers do the best job they can. And like an administrator, I have to make tough decisions. Sometimes I have to let individuals go because they're not following policy, and they just had some type of misconduct. So I'm going to continue to try to train. We have a 16-week training program. They have to ride with a deputy for 16 weeks. And during that 16 weeks, I can have a pretty good handle on what kind of deputy this is going to be. You know, my biggest thing is having the deputies wave. You know, so many times I hear law enforcement don't wave, and I try to pride my guys on waving at least. So a lot of those things. So thank you.
Thank you. The next question is related to the increasing visibility of drugs in our community. So we'll start with Marty. How do you think drugs are impacting our Brookings County communities today, and what are you doing to combat that issue? Yep. How do you think drugs are impacting our Brookings County communities today, and what are you doing to combat that issue?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. And a few years ago, we started a drug task force in Brookings. I dedicated one full-time deputy to that, and I think we did some great things and with that task force and so forth. But the task force, the deputy that I assigned to that wanted to come back to the sheriff's office, and our task force kind of fell apart at that point, and that disappointed me. Again, we tried to start a task force again. We had the initial visits. Dave Nadvik, who was the DCI director at the time, wanted to get a task force for the city of Brookings. And I was, again, going to dedicate one full-time deputy. Now, of all the agencies that participated, I called our surrounding agencies to come in, and I was the only agency that said I would dedicate a deputy to the full-time drug task force, because I do feel that it's a necessity. The acting DCI director came into my office and he says, I understand you want to do a drug task force, but we're going to put a hold on it till we have a new attorney general in there. I still think that hopefully that will still come about. You know, I'm talking to my neighborhood sheriffs, Dual County and so forth. He just was able to hire a new deputy for investigations, and so I'm hoping my investigators and we can do more things in the rural area. Drugs is always going to be an issue as long as it's cheap out there. The methamphetamine is
Sorry,
cheap
Marty.
to buy, and so thank you.
We got our pig sign one more time.
I'm just not used to cue cards.
Same question to Jeff.
So I agree. I think it's going to be a continued attention getter in our community, unfortunately. What I've seen in my career is that the war on drugs has been continued and only seems to escalate. Right now, what we see is a flood of methamphetamine and fentanyl, which is going to wreak havoc on our communities. It already does. It impacts everything from the mental health issues to the addiction issues that our publics are struggling with. We also see a spike in our rural crimes because of that. Those are drug-related crimes for the vast majority. What I would do, I do think that a regional drug task force is important to pursue, and that would be something that I would continue pursuing. Now, the way that you put those together is through relationship building and dedication. Until then, what I would do is dedicate an investigator to work drug crimes to get that active information gathering going. I'd also like to see a more active canine unit for drug detection on the road. That needs to be outside of a supervision role, and it needs to be something that the public sees.
Thank you. Continuing along the lines of drugs and the impact on our communities, this question is, if recreational marijuana passes, what unique challenges do you see as a sheriff that we will have to combat? And we'll start with Jeff.
Well, I'll be upfront. I hope that recreational marijuana does not pass. That's the way I'll be voting. Nobody's figured that out yet. We've seen that across the nation. What we're going to see is increased drug crimes, increased mental health issues, increased addiction issues. And there is no great answer to any one of those. We're going to have to work together as a team, both nonprofits and government, religious groups, to combat those. And the way that I would address it, if it passes, we're still going to be focused on, unfortunately, the methamphetamine and fentanyl that is going through our community horribly right now. So that has always been the primary target, or it is right now. But I really hope that it doesn't pass.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Great question. No, I'm against passing the marijuana issue also, and I've seen the medical side. I understand that is that there's some medical things that marijuana does, but I think we did a lot of failing on the medical side too, because people have cards that I don't think they should have cards. I got inmates coming in with medical cards and they want to smoke marijuana in the jail, and I won't let them do it. I'm sorry, is that a nurse says it's not needed and so forth. So I think we have an issue even on the medical side on people getting cards. What is going to happen is that we're seeing an increase of drug driving. In other words, now we got to train our officers for DRE, that's drug recognition experts. And although it's easy to detect the alcohol because you stop and you can smell it on their breath and stuff. But if they're under the influence of a drug, it's a little tougher. Of course, you can smell the marijuana a little bit in that. And so there's going to be, to get the drunk people off the roads from the alcohol, now we got to deal with marijuana and those types of things. But I'm hoping that the state of South Dakota will look at this and see what's going on in other states that have legalized marijuana and the trouble that they're having with the legalization of marijuana, and I hope that we will vote it down when it comes in November. So that's a plug. Vote it down, please.
Thank you. The next question is related to the events in Uvalde, Texas. So what are your thoughts on law enforcement response at the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas? And how are you preparing local law enforcement to respond to these types of situations? Marty, we'll start with you.
Sure. It's a good question because actually the Dual County Sheriff just contacted me a couple of days ago, and he's bringing, it's called the Alpha, I can't think of the group, the Alpha group. And what it is, it's training lone deputies. In other words, a lot of times a deputy sheriff is out by himself. And of course, if there is a school shooting, is that it's the position of my department or my policy is that you got to intervene. You can't wait for backup. You got to go in, even if you're by yourself. And so this training is going to help that lone officer on that initial into the door and so forth. And also we have SWAT teams. I don't have anybody on particular on the SWAT team right now, but maybe in the future I'll have someone on the SWAT team. But the SWAT team has went out, which is Brookings Police Department is the main organization for our local SWAT team. They have went out into the county schools along with my deputies and know the layouts, go in, and so if there is a school shooting and so forth. The thing is that a school shooting is probably 6 minutes or less. That's the struggle you have as a deputy sheriff or as me as an administrator is my deputy might be not can get there in 6 minutes. So a lot of this has to depend on the schools. They have their protocols, and if there is a school, if there's something that happens, to shut down the doors, and we try to go in and teach them how to lock their doors and what they could do to protect themselves and those types of things. So we got to rely on that, especially in the county.
Thanks, Marty. Same question to Jeff. What are your thoughts on the law enforcement response in Uvalde, and how are you preparing local law enforcement to respond to those types of situations?
So Uvalde was a failure in leadership. I don't think I would hope that you're not going to see that type of response in South Dakota. We've been pretty well trained as it is, as law enforcement officers, that if there's danger to a life and that it's ongoing, that you're gonna intervene, and that's going to happen immediately. My leadership style would be that same type of leadership. If anybody has any indication that there's somebody's life is on danger, seconds count, and you can't wait and you can't hold back. I'm always an advocate for increased training. I do think that having deputies on the joint SWAT team would be a good idea. Marty's exactly right, though. In 6 minutes, your SWAT team's not going to be there. It's going to be the initial responders. We do benefit from having members or deputies on the SWAT team just by increasing their tactical training. And the chances are increased that deputy would be the one that responds. So I think that you would benefit by just having that joint partnership with the SWAT team, and then also having that increased training level for operators that are also deputies.
Thank you. The next question we'll move on to relates to leadership and kind of direction in the future. So what do you feel the Sheriff's Office position on activation of body cameras for officers should be in terms of accountability for the office and for the responding officers? We'll start with Jeff.
I think that documentation of what's happening in law enforcement is expected now. We have to, I think it's expected of us to have body cameras on and active when we're interacting with the public. Things have changed since I've been in law enforcement. You can't just, we're not able to sit back and just say that something happened just because I say so. We have to prove that it happened with video. And I think what we will see is that being increased in the future. You look at that in officer use of force or officer-involved shootings. The recent expectation for the National Public Information Officers Association was immediate same-day release of body cam footage for officer shootings. I support that. I think that transparency and integrity are what we depend on, and we have to do everything we can do to make sure that the public knows that we're there for them.
Thank you. Marty, same question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. Is that I wrote a grant, and so was able to get body cameras for all my deputies when that became popular to have body-worn cameras. I still don't understand why the Highway Patrol doesn't have body-worn cameras. I think nowadays every law enforcement should have body-worn cameras. Biggest thing is why I took my person off the SWAT team is that I learned that the SWAT team doesn't use their cameras if they go on a deployment. And that's in direct violation of my policy. Anytime that you engage with the public, it is the policy of my department is to have that body camera on. Now, I don't know if that's changed, but I will not put anybody on the local SWAT team until that policy is changed where they wear their body cameras when they're deployed. What's happened nationwide is that SWAT teams have went in and have bet the wrong address and these types of things. And so I think it's important that those things are documented, that if something happens, that we got documentation on our body cameras. And again, I'm a firm believer of body-worn cameras, is that when I get a complaint, I say I'm going to review the camera footage, and they go, oh, never mind, maybe I'll just pay the ticket. So I think I'm a firm believer of body-worn cameras, and we've had them for a long time. We upgraded twice and I think that they're great and beneficial, and I have less complaints when I check the cameras.
Thank you. So the next one, again, leadership. How do you prepare or train your officers for animosity they may face as a result of the changes in society in the last few years? Marty, we'll start with you. Yep. So based on the changes in society in the last few years, how do you prepare or train your officers for any animosity that they may face?
Oh, that's a good question. Ever since, what's great about the Brookings community is that, Sioux Falls, maybe some of the larger communities have felt that, especially after George Floyd. But our local law enforcement, or actually my office, hasn't really been a victim of that animosity stuff. We are challenged a little bit more sometimes on traffic stops. Why did you stop us? Those types of things. We have some dealings with sovereign citizens that don't believe in government. We're seeing a little more of that, those types of individuals. And a lot of it has to do with training. The CIT training is a big thing on how to handle an individual. If someone's yelling at us, don't yell back, because that's usually gets things going. So you have to kind of in a calm voice in that. But I think a lot of it has to do with training, engaging in public. In other words, talking with individuals and those types of things. So I think a lot of it is just is communications, and again, training is part of that. And law enforcement officers have to take a lot from the public. Not all the time, but sometimes we're challenged, and we got to accept that challenge and just make sure we handle it the best we can for the outcome.
Thank you. Same question to you, Jeff. How do you prepare or train officers for any animosity they may face in the public?
Again, I think that starts back with the type of people that we hire and we retain. There's a lot of change in law enforcement and agencies, and veteran officers are becoming far and few between because of those pressures. We need to make sure that we're recruiting and retaining people, because I think your veteran officers are going to be much more apt to respond appropriately than somebody who's sub 5 years on the patrol. So I think it goes back to the retention and recruitment. I also believe in training. CIT is a good training. I think there's training beyond that as well. And I spoke about participation with the Joint SWAT team. Now, what I would also participate in is increased training for hostage negotiators or crisis negotiators. That's a level above that, and that would be something that would bring to the office. So that is the same type of mindset of de-escalation and kind of having some broad shoulders to take some of that criticism. So I think you have to be able to do that. It's expected. Your veteran officers are much more apt to do that than younger ones, and we have to keep an eye on them, but we need to make sure that they are trained appropriately.
Thank you. For our last question, we're going to project forward a little bit. So with vision and leadership, what do you believe the biggest challenge to the Sheriff's Department will be for the next 4 years? So we'll start with Jeff.
The challenges that we have in the next 4 years, that continued issue with drugs in our community, that's not going away anytime soon. We need to address it. We need to take a much more proactive approach towards it. I also think that relationships with the public and other professionals is something that we really need to keep an eye on. If we're not building trust and building relationships, we're losing them. So that's I've believed in that firmly my entire career. That's going to be something that you're going to see me bring to the table there. On top of that, recruitment, retention. We've talked about that quite a bit today, and implementation of technology. I think the expectations to bring technology into investigations is increasing. There's areas that we can partner up and bring in and implement technology to help us increase our chances or our ability to solve crimes. There's things like license plate readers that Madison PD has implemented. I'd like to implement that up here in Brookings. I think that small changes like that of implementing technology are going to bring a cutting edge to solving crimes that we're facing, like the ATM thefts that happened this summer or the lug nut issues that happened this summer. It's implementing that technology continually and being open to that is going to be a big change or a big challenge in the future.
Thank you. Marty, same question to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Technology is great, but you got to replace technology every 3 or 4 years. So the biggest thing is just working with the commissioners on budget, trying to make sure that we have a 5-year plan to budget out. We have computers in our cars, but they're probably outdated in 2 years. So it's budgeting to get those computers back in the cars. And I'm for technology. I was a pilot city for eCare, and for 3 years now, Avera Health has bought iPads for all my patrol cars when it comes to mental health. So when a deputy goes out to a situation on welfare checks, we do a lot of welfare checks. Between the Brookings Police Department and myself, we've already did over 500 welfare checks already this year. They all don't result in taking them in and do evaluations, but with our eCare is that the deputy goes out, triages. If the person does not have a plan to hurt themselves, we can put them on the iPad, and they talk to a counselor 24 hours a day is available in Sioux Falls. A lot of times, higher percentage of those types of technology has let the person stay in the home on a safety plan, and then there's a follow-up with behavioral health. But I'm not privy to that having the follow-up because it's a HIPAA. So technology is great. I'm for technology. We try to do as much as we can, but the big thing is working with the commissioners to make sure we have budgets. So there's more demands on law enforcement.
Thank you.
And it's important to stay with those demands.
So we're going to move into our final closing segment. So each of you gets 2 minutes for your closing remarks. And then just a reminder that the forum will be broadcast on Mediacom Channel 9, Swift Health Communication, and ITC, and will be replayed tonight at 9 p.m., Sunday at 2 p.m., and Monday at 6 p.m. And they'll be on the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel next week. So if you want to go back and re-listen to things, or if folks didn't get a chance to hear something, those channels will all be available to you. So for final closing remarks, 2 minutes. We'll start with Marty, and Jeff, you'll get the last piece. So Marty, your turn.
Get the last word, Jeff. Anyway, again, I want to thank the Chamber for this opportunity. Also, I'd like to thank Brookings County for trusting me for the last 23 years, and I'm humbled about that. I feel that I have a good record, and my leadership proves that. And I've been in a leadership role since 1989 when I was a police sergeant, a lieutenant, and then moved into the sheriff's office. I've got 38 employees that I supervise, but I can't do that all by myself. I have 2 sergeants. I have a jail administrator. I have an assistant sheriff that helps me with that. So I have 38 employees, part-time employees. I have a budget of $4.2 million that I try to regulate, work with the commission. And so all this is important stuff. I try to be fiscal responsibility. I don't try to spend money where it's not. I take out, I rotate police cars every 2 years so my deputies don't have to be in cars that have 150,000 miles on them. And this is all a struggle, trying to meet the demands, the cost of law enforcement, staying within the budget. And again, I would hope that my last 23 years on as being your sheriff, and I ask you for your vote on November 8th so I can continue that. And thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Jeff, your closing comments.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you all for coming and paying attention today. I know it's the Jacks are going to be starting here soon, and that's important to us. But so I look back about why I'm running, and I want to remind you guys. I think it's important to provide competition for our leadership, and competition is what provides the best product for the citizens or any service. So I thought back about what I have, and the big man upstairs kind of led me in a direction that I didn't recognize was happening until the last couple of years. I have experience as a small business person in corrections, in patrol, and investigations. I've been successful in all of those aspects. My thought process shifted more towards leading others towards that success and providing that competition and that option for the public. My competitor and I have a lot of similar stances on things, and I consider him a good friend. He hired me in 2004. So what I want you to keep in mind in November is the future. Now, Marty has provided a good base, and he's done good things for the community. I'm here to build off that base and provide future success for Brookings County. The things that I bring is a fresh set of eyes to the same problems that we've been facing, a higher level of energy, and dedication to the community. So thank you again for coming out today. I ask for your vote and your support in November, but thank you for coming out today.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending. Thanks again to the Brookings Chamber of Commerce and the Public Affairs Committee, our sponsors, Brookings Economic Development Corporation, and our coffee sponsor, Cool Beans, and go Jacks.